a chance, just take a look at the wonderful co-creator that is likely on your table. If you don't have one, please visit Jacob, sitting right there in the gray sweatshirts. He's fantastic, and I believe this is his creation. So as we come to a comfortable space, I'd like to invite you all to calm down as much as possible. Enjoying the sounds of the room around you. Or wherever you are, if you're prepared, I'd like to invite you to close your physical eyes and focus on your breathing. Noticing the sounds of the room around you and enjoying them, enjoying the children playing and the people ordering coffee. But go inside your own personal inner world. Using your imagination, I'd like you to imagine the air moving. Imagine the air moving from the tip of your nose down your throat, filling up your belly. As much as you can, enjoying the sounds of the room around you in this meditative space. And taking a few deep breaths. Imagining that beautiful air flowing into your belly, just below your lungs, filling up your stomach, and allowing this breath to calm you. I'd like you to now visualize your physical heart and place a tiny spark of glowing white light inside of it. Noticing that with every in and out breath, that glowing white light is turning into now an orb that is encompassing your physical heart and pressing up the front, the back, the sides, down into your belly and up into your neck. This beautiful glowing white orb is now expanding to encompass your physical body. With every in and out breath, it goes 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Until you fill this entire room with that beautiful glowing light. This is your heart space. Interacting with but not absorbing anybody else's energy, just extending that glowing information from your own personal frequency vibration. The loudest part of your body is now interacting with everyone else in this room. I'd like to invite you to sit here in contemplation, paying attention with your heart as much as you can. Feeling comfortable sharing your ideas, your thoughts, your words when it's appropriate. And honoring all of the speakers and all of the performers. Thank you for joining us today in this beautiful co-creative space. Taking a few more deep breaths. Honoring each and every one of you in all of your journeys. Thank you for joining me in this short guided meditation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jim Pappas, and I'm here for a specific reason. Because of my friend Julia over there, married Jacob. And that was how I got to know Jacob and got to know something about him and what he thinks about his life. And it's interesting to me because I just turned 75 in April. And I'm here today to learn something about something I know nothing about. This is like a whole new world for me. The world I grew up in is totally divorced from this. But I am so thrilled to be here. I'm thrilled that Jacob asked me to do this, and it's a real honor. I'm also on the radio on CJNU, the Nostalgia Station, that's 3.7 FM. I'm on every Monday, usually from 1 to 3:30 with my own show. And that's just a sidelight of what I do. I also teach cooking, I'm a grandfather, and I write for Lifestyle 65. A little bit word about Sam's Place today. This is a social enterprise that is a division of MCC. As a group, we're here to benefit the larger community, and the mission is to orient outwards, to be better for humanity, and this is a very apt situation for this location for the launch of Co-Creative today. This is the launch of a new periodical, and it's less a celebration rather than a convocation of community. Jacob has brought together all kinds of people who touch him, whom he feels connected to, and I think that's really important to read all about this. Today we'll have people who will be talking about their projects in creating community, how their community collaborates, and what it takes to live in a community and more. We have three main communities representing with us here today. Candice, Humeny, and Gerhard Dekker from Northern Sun Farm, right over here. Lecocq and Holly Dyck from Myriad Village, right over there. And Rempel from Ploughshares, right over here. So we're really thrilled to have you here, and I'm not going to take up too much time because I think Jacob's the one that really needs to be heard, and I want Jacob to come up here now and tell us all about co-creating.
Is this working yet? Yes. Well, thanks for everyone for coming, especially on a long weekend. This is great to see everyone out. Welcome to Jim and CJ and you, and what you're doing for us here today. Also, for those from Myriad Village, Ploughshares, and Northern Sun Farm, it's your stories that are important. So, hello, in case you don't know me, my name is H. Jacob Bullock. I want to give a brief background of the origins of this newsletter and how it came to be. I'd like to say I was born a fiction writer. I self-published a novella on Amazon at the end of 2011, and after visiting the Manitoba Earth Shipbuild in 2012 and seeing the journalism that covered it, felt there was something missing there. I sensed it was more than just a novelty, but something that far more profound. I decided to learn the story of the people who built it. Not only was the design smart, I learned it drew from something called permaculture. It was a wisdom teaching that could be applied in many different capacities. My article was published in 2015 by Dekker. In 2012, my wife Candice and I attended a Psytrance festival where I experienced collaborative culture on a world scale. 20,000 people represented 100 different countries there. Permaculture gardens were in full display. They were not only gorgeous, practical. I saw people of different ethnicity and language working together and creating something that was far beyond any one individual. I spent time in something called the Humeny Village, met new people, and danced in the sand under a full August moon. In that small valley in Portugal, I felt connected to something greater. It was that crucible experience of global village that has always left me wondering how to bring it home. You too. That feeling I experienced as part of a global community planted a seed that the article with the airship nourished. The two were a collaborative community affair, and their visions complemented each other. I decided to bring a little bit of that home. In 2013, my partner and I visited our first eco-village. Lecocq was forming in the wilds of British Columbia. It inspired the both of us to rethink our direction. Nature is very important to us. And over the next few years, we began to connect with others in eco-village communities. We visited Twin Oaks in Virginia, and there is what I saw, what I now understand as social enterprise, applied in a communitarian ecosystem.
That's a microphone.
That's a microphone. Applied in social enterprise that applied in a communitarian ecosystem that made it possible for people to just live. If Lecocq represented a seedling, Twin Oaks represented, well, mature oak trees that tended to their own ecosystem. In 2014, this guy was born. That event affirmed my commitment to a more conscientious, responsible world. In 2015, I visited Northern Sun Farm for the first time. Myriad Village. My interactions with them were next. I looked hard for communities in Manitoba, at least trying to get a sense for what was here and what had been done. As a journalist and blogger, I thought maybe I could serve a larger community as an observer, snapping photos and writing about what I had seen. I felt inspired to cover these communities with a journalistic integrity that works to show not only an accurate picture, but why it's important. I remember recently reading on Maria Popova's blog, brainpickings.com, that writers create the frame. I had been struggling with understanding how this planetary shift we were going through was being talked about and written about. A lot of it just didn't sit right with me. I found this idea thought-provoking. I wanted to present these stories of community in a way that also communicated possibilities. It's not something that's a pipe dream of someone, of an unknown character on TV, but it's real. It may not always be easy. Sometimes we need to consider our own path of healing. But collaborative, cooperative community living is a real thing, and people are doing it. It may not be for everyone, but it is a shared reality. And as we move through this difficult time on this planet, I have felt the rhetoric used to refer to it is also important. It's not a race. It's not a fight. It's not about securing one's family in a fallout bunker or stockpiling ammo. That sort of talk only perpetuates the perception that we're all in this on our own and that the person with the most wins. On the contrary, in an evolutionary perspective, those that continue to fight amongst each other are the ones that are causing their own end. Given our current historical context and an evolutionary perspective, we absolutely have to come to terms, cooperative terms, with each other on our planet. Once we really understand that we're all in this together, we're able to more effectively come to balance with ourselves and each other and the planet that we share. That's why I choose to use words and concepts like evolution, collaboration, cooperation, and even egalitarian in my communication about this. Indeed, the idea of personal evolution is critical here too. We wield the power to choose as a tool in crafting our own future. How do we choose to evolve? What do we choose to give focus to? This is a component of why any social media campaign that I run with this will not use outrage, anger, or provocation, despite that being exactly what social media campaigns elicit. Inspiration, hope, and even just questioning is my approach. I don't want to diminish the very serious issues we face collectively. This is part of why on the cover of the first issue of a periodical titled The Co-Creator is the question, what will we create together? I will go into more about personal evolution and choice in the final issue of the newsletter, where the theme is planetary stewardship. So that is a little bit about where the newsletter comes from and my interests in the many themes and aspects of their crafting. This newsletter has evolved since its beginning, from an email list to a full-color PDF and costs associated with hard copy publication. It's been a lot of fun and a lot of learning. It's been an adventure every step of the way. For each issue reflects a theme that is important not only to me, but a significant component in a larger whole. Each upcoming issue will have its own theme, but the central, overarching theme is human habitation and how these themes fit into it. The first issue you have with you on your table. People from the communities represented inside are here to talk about their projects, to share their experiences in a collaborative, cooperative community. Issue number 2 will be out later this summer when it will be about earthships and passive houses. Nicole Bennett of the Manitoba Earthship and Mavis Lewis of the Aspen Roof Passive House will be key figures in these stories. The third issue will be on children. It will include content on Nature Summit, the Discovery Children's Center, forest schools, and more. Number 4's theme will be on permaculture and other local efforts. 5 will be on culture and society, include more about healing. The 6th will be a wrap-up issue on what it is that we choose to be a good steward, what it is we choose to do to be a good steward of our planet, and how the UN Sustainable Development Goals tie in. There may be a wrap-up event after the final issue, but that remains to be seen given the interest levels. I just want to add that as a literature project, the Co-Creator is the official newsletter of ecovillages.ca. The website's plan is to be a platform to help springboard other food-secure, climate-resilient communities in Manitoba. Through this, both urban and rural renewal and revitalization can happen. Ecovillages.ca focuses more on rural, but the resources developed can be used for both. So let's start our journey into the world of local intentional communities and hear what they are like.
Well, I'm happy to be here. I'm pretty impressed. That magazine that's coming about is definitely coming about. I've read a bit of Jacob's literature. I like it. So I think that this periodical is going to be worth writing and worth reading. I was interviewed for the first issue, and it was about eco-villages, and so we're here to talk about that. I didn't prepare anything because I find I'm just happier talking. I guess that would be a good reason to kind of lay out a little bit about my history and how I found myself in the eco-village setting. So my name's Justin Lecocq, and I don't need to tell you my life story, but I work with the Western Canada Wilderness Committee. It's a local wildlife advocacy group. I've been working and fundraising and running the Candice fundraising group for about 8 years, off and on. In between that time, I've been working and volunteering on organic farms here and there in Canada and the United States. And I took my permaculture design course at the Harvest Moon Institute. That was highly informative, but also highly connective. Meeting a lot of good people and knowing what's really happening in Manitoba. Our teacher at that event actually told the people in the Harvest Moon area that area was just suited to be the sort of permaculture hub for Canada because of its centrality and the access to farmland and the way that community was in transition. If anybody knows anything about that, Clearwater, Manitoba was just disappearing. The town was losing population entirely, and this society came about, bought the school for $1, and formed a school to educate folks on the subject of, sustainable development and permaculture and all sorts of things now. Now they do a festival, and I'm sure you guys have heard of the Harvest Moon Festival. Well, for Manitoba, and that was quite a few years ago now, that was connecting me to a reality that we have here. And there are a few elements to that reality, what sort of culminates, not just that area, but just us in Manitoba as being very well suited for establishing roots in a sustainable development, and I should say a sustainable future, not just sustainable ecologically, but socially, and in the way of facing climate change and a lot of the issues that we're inevitably going to face as a society and as a species and as a planet. So Manitoba is pretty much at the center of a tectonic plate. Thus, we're not too concerned about any major earthquakes. We're in the center of a continent, so we're not facing any of the tsunamis and hurricanes, which are getting more and more frequent. We're in a bit of a floodplain in Winnipeg here, so you guys have fun for the next 60 years because that rain's going to get heavier. I know working in environmental advocacy, focusing and following climate change very closely, that for Manitoba we should expect our heavy summer rains to last a lot longer each time they come. So floods are an issue, but that is lesser than the intensive issues that we face everywhere else in the world, not to mention the fact that we live in a relatively safe place right now. So, hey, I happen to be born here, so I can just think about all these great reasons to stick around. But for these reasons, not only for me to stick around, I think for these reasons, we should stick around and work to establish this place on the earth as a place that has a very strong possible future. Now, up until well before 8 years ago, I guess I decided that I'd commit my life to environmental advocacy and environmentalism and just address that issue because I'm an individual. We're all individuals and we can only get so much done in this short lifetime. So the Wilderness Committee made sense. And anyways, after volunteering and all of that, I guess I started to discover that I needed to live a more authentic lifestyle that's connected to this set of ideals and this future vision. And so my partner and I started to explore eco-villages. I don't even know where it came across the word at the time. It just seems like something I've always known about now, I guess. But we realized that there was a few communities in Manitoba, but there wasn't nearly enough. There should be more. There should be more people spread around this province engaged in active pursuits that involve, healthy, responsible, long-term thinking and land stewardship. Long story short on that journey, I think I'll skip ahead just to what Myriad Village is, because that's what I'm here to talk about. I'm not old enough to know when to stop talking about myself, so figuring that out. Myriad Village is a very, very newly forming, it's in its infancy, I guess I would say. Although we're making progress, things are happening. Myriad Village is a cooperative. It's actually a marketing co-op, technically. It's made up now of 20 members, and that was a big deal for us. We started off, well, I don't know where we started off. It goes way back, but we're at 20 now, and that was 8 new members just in the spring. And if you haven't noticed, it only just started. So we're getting a lot of interest. But a few of the things that make Myriad Village distinct and why we made it the way it is. So first of all, Myriad Village, that name, myriad meaning many, the 10,000 things, diversity. Now that was a sort of response to us as a group realizing that we're very diverse, not just like ethnically, but because we live in this society where we're able to access information from any direction, and we really do have a mosaic of beliefs and views, even within seemingly close-knit set of ideals like an eco-village. You'd kind of think if we were all going to settle into the idea of living ecologically, we'd probably agree on almost everything. Well, that's not necessarily true. There can be some very deep spiritual, philosophical differences, and from the get-go, we decided to directly address that with that name by simply acknowledging diversity. Because I've seen, just from following up on eco-villages across all over the world and looking at the challenges they face, and one of those challenges is, interpersonal relationships, like they would be in any community. This isn't... Almost every issue I see facing an eco-village is just an issue facing any community. There's no real distinctive features other than the very geographical elements, which even then are not alone naturally to eco-villages. I don't even know, is Myriad Village an eco-village? It's a response to a movement and to a demographic that is here. I've heard the same story more than once, more than twice. And it's about a young couple who maybe have a kid or maybe thinking about having a kid, and who have a vision, a sort of fantasy of accessing land, of buying some land. And heck, Manitoba's got a lot of cheap land. You can go and buy 160 acres in Vita for $20,000 and call yourself a homesteader. Well, I know this story, and I know people who've gone and done it, and who found themselves quite lonely. 3 or 4 years or so into that process, they decided to back out and back away from the last 4 years of invested energy in this landscape. And that's okay. We learn from our experiences. But I realized that there are a lot more people like that who either don't have the courage to take that plunge or don't have the audacity to take that risk. And I think that's not necessarily a bad thing, that they're holding off, because it isn't working out for many to just be alone in the bush with your family trying to start the revolution where nobody sees you, right? And so, naturally, togetherness is a fundamental element of human communities. And that's why I definitely rooted in being involved in something co-creative. There was a day, a couple, 2 years maybe ago, 2.5 years ago. I don't know, I lose track. I don't pay close attention to the time. But a friend of mine started a Facebook group called Manitoba Eco Village Currently Forming. And I had visited Northern Sun and enjoyed what I saw there. I wasn't developing a relationship there at the time. It didn't feel like it was happening. And I actually, at this time, had backed out. I had said to myself, you know what, we're going to go homestead, but we're just going to do it a little closer to the city and have an integrative lifestyle, a little bit of a PG version of that extreme, reality, because of just the fact that I wasn't feeling drawn at the time. But I saw this little Facebook group and I decided to just pop in, and it turned out it was their second meeting, and I kind of wish I would have caught the first one because I was at every single meeting from then on. And it was silly. Those meetings were silly. They were usually in this girl's basement, in her parents' basement, and we would sit in a big circle, and there would always be new people. Almost every time there were new people, which was interesting, was good, but it was also indicative that no one was following through because it was silly. We would sit down, and people would come and ask questions, and they would look at anybody who looked like they knew what was going on and say, "So what's the plan?" And I tend to project a demeanor like I know what's going on. So everyone was looking at me often and saying, "What's the plan?" You know? And I said, "What do you think? What do you think we should do? Because we don't have a plan. We're here to create a plan, I guess." And that happened for months and months. And we really didn't get organized to actually create a plan until we did. And I think, 6 or 7 of us decided to commit to meeting, I think at the time was on a weekly basis, to just ironing out the details, asking the hard questions, and stop with these huge group debates on every single subject. We really weren't getting anywhere. So we decided to form a focus group. And so we allowed Manitoba Eco Village, currently forming, to become Manitoba Eco Village Network, which was just what the girl who created it wanted it to be called once we left, basically. And we didn't leave the meetings, we just decided to start a focus group. And that focus group became Myriad Village. And it grew and it shrunk. People's lives got complicated, and it kind of boiled down to 4 of us. Myself and my partner, and Jen and Monica, my 2 dearest friends right now. We worked for months and months to create a co-op, ask those questions, talk about the philosophical implications and the real implications of what we're doing. Looking for land. We had a generous donor that made a world of a difference for land acquisition, and so we were able to search for land within a budget. And not to get too carried away with the land searching journey, we ended up in the municipality of Armstrong. So now we're in Armstrong. We have 320 acres, and we formed a marketing cooperative, and we have a very positive relationship with that municipality, which we realized was a very fundamental element of this, because as you can imagine, eco-villages are not exactly common or normal or understood. Yeah?
Where is Armstrong?
Oh, the municipality is Armstrong. I think everyone in Armstrong would assume everyone would ask that question. It happens to actually be the largest municipality in Manitoba. It's in the Inner Lake. So just after Rockwood is Armstrong. So you're just going up that number 7 highway, and Rockwood, I think, would have what do you call it? Stony Mountain and Stonewall, and then Armstrong would be like Inwood, Comarno, all the towns that nobody knows about. Well, I live there part-time now, so at the community or in Armstrong. There's lots of people in Armstrong. It's actually the largest but least populated municipality, so not a lot. But as for Myriad Village, we are still trying to form we're going to need to rezone and start probably a condominium, a flatland condominium status. And we need to build a road. We need to get a well. So we're working from the very foundation. Like I said, this is its infancy. So right now, there are a handful of us who are there part-time. I have a yurt that was built by a friend, a member of the Eco Village, Fergus, with Full Circle Yurts. So it's on a deck. We got a little fireplace in there. We're able to spend the spring, summer, and fall there, but we have to keep our rental in the city. So really in this transitional state. So yes and no. And I'm probably the most rooted there. Although there are other people with yurts. Just a layout, sort of visual of the infrastructure. All that we have right now is an outhouse, an above-ground straw bale composting outhouse we call the Throne, because you have to walk up the tower to get there. And so one 16-foot yurt, 12-foot yurt, and a 9-foot yurt, 2 12-foot yurts and a 9-foot yurt. They're almost all on decks. There's a bus, one of those old jail buses that got renovated to be a camper, a very, very cool little gadget. 2 campers, just basically portable dwellings so that if anyone in the neighborhood gets a little nervous about what we're doing, decides to get upset about it, we can just say, no problem, we can pack up and move this structure, because they are all absolutely movable. There's nothing fixed there. Nothing literally in the ground. No foundations. And that's because our property is zoned as a rural, not rural residential, general agricultural estate. So we have to follow those rules. That having been said, we've decided to be very straightforward and as communicative and honest with our municipalities we can possibly be. I don't know if I'm going to be applying for permits to build a little woodshed or anything, but generally we want to have a positive, sustainable relationship with that small government. Now, I had a few questions. I wonder if there's anything bouncing in anybody else's mind that could guide this somewhere else.
Why a marketing co-op in particular?
Good question. So Manitoba doesn't have land co-op status. We can't do that. That would have been great, but we don't have those. And then really when you look at the different co-ops that you can establish, this was really the only one that would allow us to do many, many different things on it. And actually, to further answer that question, it has a lot to do with that demographic. So when we were in those meetings in the old days, 2 years ago, and you'd have 16 people around, we realized, we were asking people, so how real is this for you? What are your goals? And half of them were students with debt. So who's got money to make this happen, right? Well, because that was our formative group, we realized that one of the first things we would do, one of the most sober discoveries or sort of ideas we had was to have this not only as a village or community, but actually a registered existing seasonal campground. So it would have a growing and shrinking, sort of fluctuating population, right? So it's an open door policy. We wanted to create a system that would allow for homes, permanent dwellings, many of them, businesses, a campground, which would be a business, and thus recreational access, and so on and so forth. So what's cool about a marketing co-op is a marketing co-op markets a thing. That's about all it has to do. So Myriad Village Marketing Co-op Limited markets a property that is called Myriad Village, right? And so it promotes that this exists, and nothing in its intrinsic legal structure limits what happens to that asset, to that object that it markets.
Does it own the land?
Yes, the cooperative owns the property outright. The members are members of a co-op, thus they own shares of the property. For those who don't understand co-ops, but that's basically what it is we all mutually, equally own this property. That was very important, as you can imagine. I've been offered a lot of opportunities to just move onto my land and don't worry about the fact that I own it because I'm just a good guy. And that sounds nice, but when it comes down to it, if I'm building a house, I'm starting my family and rooting my gardens, I want to know that I have some rights, and I don't think I'm alone in that. In fact, I know as a matter of fact I'm not alone because nobody seems to bite that worm, because people have put that out, and they don't grow. So a share is $100. The membership fees is $600. Only $700 for what we call the co-founder membership. So that's for a year. Each year, $600 is renewed and $100 remains because it's a share. That's for now. Because, like I said, this is a co-founder membership. It's made to be very accessible and affordable because we have no road, we have no well, we have no electricity, right? So if you're willing and capable to be there to build that road, drill that well, so to say, volunteer on the board, start those gardens, live in a yurt or camper, right? Then, yeah, $600 gets you access to equal ownership of a property. And we, the co-founder members, and that is still open. For those who are interested, that's absolutely still open. We're still selling co-founder memberships. I don't know how long we will be. I think we'll stop selling them once we see intrinsic value. Once our property is developed so much that it has value, and maybe it starts filling up in a way that we need to be careful. Like many other people have seen, where their land starts to get developed to a state in which they see the density arising. Now, we're not in that state. We're in a promotional, marketing, outward state looking for help. I expect I don't know, 7 out of 10 of those members to not stick around long term, but they're going to help me build that garden, right? They're going to help this formative process. And of course, build a community so that this is something that can live on socially. So one day we'll probably be selling that same $600 annual fee with a $100 share plus a buy-in fee, which I don't know what it'll be because we have to do the math. Could be $5,000, could be 1,000, could be 10, I don't know. It all depends on where we get and when we get there. So I told myself I would do a little ditty about permaculture, but it seems to me I bet someone else is going to be able to talk about permaculture. And I am closing in a couple of minutes. So I'm going to say thank you, Jacob, for giving me this time to tell Myriad Village's story and my story. And wonder if anyone else has one more thing to toss my way as for a question. Nope. You sure do. More than that. They're between... Yes. Full Circle Yurts. That's Winnipeg. Yeah. In fact, the owner of that company is a member of Myriad Village. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Holly is not a member of Myriad, but she enjoys being there, and I'd like her to give her perspective on the community and tell us what she feels.
Check, check. That is quite a scary looking thing. So yeah, I am, like it said, or like was said, I am not a founding member, but I have been introduced to Myriad Village through Justin, and funny enough, I also was a canvasser at the Wilderness Committee. I guess I'll start with a little bit of that story, I suppose, how I was introduced. Maybe that's a good way to, because, yeah, I'm part of that demographic like mentioned, but it was just a random coincidence almost that I became to get to know the people of Myriad Village. And it happened so because I turned down a job opportunity and Justin came in and was that person that filled in that job. And then from there, I heard about his exciting kind of visions and stuff, and definitely the search for the land. I was sort of, I was a porter at that point in it, but I actually just came in after the fact because I was one of those students with debt and lots of other priorities. But I'm recently graduated and actually have one of my classmates here anyways. We're from Community Economic Development, which is representing that vague program, if you don't know what that means, and kind of cliche that possibly might be helping to develop a community and being part of it's very vague. I won't get into any of that. You can look into it. But yeah, my points I wanted to make was that I want to give you sort of the inside of what I feel and think about when I go out there, and also just thinking about it as like just someone at home, like alone, in that kind of way. So my first impression, definitely fun and really fresh and new, and I really see how it's a place where you can live, work, and play, and a lot of serious stuff too, where there's ways to learn how to play and bring meaning to play, which is really interesting. And then there's also kind of really serious stuff like paying the taxes and like adult things, right? And communicating, like what was mentioned, communicating ideas, and then having ideas, like in my opinion, sort of ideas are only real when we share them, and then when we can work and actually commit to creating those plans and making those real in the reality is the big challenge. So yeah, that's to become. For some more specific things, what I understand is that there's a well and a driveway, whatever you want to call that, a road of some sort. But when I go out there, it's a lot of young, fresh energy and stuff. It could be the kids running around, right? Or just the kind of the whatever is happening, right? yeah. And to be honest, I suppose like it feels like I was reborn into some sort of weird family, I guess. Because it came into an interesting point in my life where, yeah, just kind of isolated and stuff. It's kind of emotional almost, because it was too good to be true, it sounded like. But yeah, still letting it set in. And maybe a healthy bit of a healthy skepticism, I guess, is what is sort of coming from other places, right? And I see how that could be something that people, yeah, are thinking about. So there's questions, of course, and serious things to be answered. By Justin would be the best person today here, for sure. For myself, that would be the go-to, but Monica is also a nice, open person. They're all very open people. And Jacob, too. I think you were the first one who took me out there, actually, because I don't own a vehicle, so I'm like really like the single person that needs to hitch a ride and stuff, and then we had a nice chat that first time. Yeah. So there's, like, I feel really, really good in how there's a lot of cultural competency, and then the sustainability, like, what's kind of obvious maybe, but not. And the interdependence, I guess, I want to talk about how that kind of like fits in, because in this world, we all work really hard, right? And that could be working really hard at a paying job, and then what do you get out of that? Personally, is that feeding like what you really need? Maybe not. So there's a lot of part-time work that we all are passionate about and do, and that is the important stuff. But then there's that work, the life work, that is what needs to happen behind the scenes, and like, you know, like just the things that we do, like building and maintaining. So a lot of people that come together and work in that capacity as a paying thing, and then together doing all the stuff in between that help each other out, a lot of overlap, is like really reassuring, I suppose. I'm not advocating for like the 4-hour work week, which is like an idea, but like there's an in-between between 40 hours plus and 4 hours, right? And realistically what people need to get done. Sometimes it's not possible. And then also being out of the city sometimes is not possible for some people. I grew up in the city, but I also had a family cabin in Ontario, so it's a lot of that, like going back out to a place that's very wild, but also sort of surrounded by neighbors, right? We see people out there. Yeah. What else was I going to say? Yeah. I don't know if there's anything else I can think of. I had some notes, but yeah. You got a question? Oh. Oh, I missed that part. Yeah. Well, yeah, so I'm a single person right now, just like I said, fully like educated, I suppose. And I'm educated in other things too. No, so I'm not committed to living, and then, yeah, I guess completely honest, like living out in the country or out at Myriad Village. Yeah. I have been there 3 or 4 times. I was just out there last weekend with Monica, and previous to that I missed out on Justin being there for the whole weekend. So I stayed in her camper. So myself, we were out with her dogs, and yeah, we did some work. But to be completely honest, like I'm leaning towards a yes, and if I was like really, really honest, it's like a yes that I would be part of this. It's just kind of framing myself as the person that's just an outsider, but you know. No, like I currently am sort of looking for a job, and also now really committed at developing my own work, which is very small, like just personal stuff that I do. And I just met up with someone yesterday wanting to do a Veg Fest, the ever first Winnipeg Veg Fest, if anyone's heard of that. Veg is vegan/vegetarian, but the actual festival could also incorporate environmental perspectives. There's a person, apparently a NASCAR driver, that has a totally electric vehicle that would be one of the speakers. So there's like, I don't know, and like diet's not everything when you think about that kind of stuff. But we don't have one in Winnipeg, and apparently there's a vegfest.ca that you can go on and just like see all these things that need to be done, like almost like a checklist for making a Veg Fest. It was really easy, but I wasn't. I just kind of came in almost in the same kind of way, like it already started, so I'm going to go to their board meetings. It's just a project. So a lot of us have these small projects, we can go on and on about what we do personally, but like that, for instance, is a completely volunteer thing, but the world still needs it, right? So, yeah. Any other things from over there? Got my heart.
Thank you, Holly, for sharing your perspective on that. Before we go any further, we're going to take a short break. I'd like to encourage you all to go to the bar, get yourself a coffee or something to eat. We'll be about 15 minutes, and then we're going to reconvene with Marcus from Ploughshares. So we're going to resume. Thank you, everyone. So we're going to get started. Out near Beausejour, down a dusty dirt road, lies a multi-family farm. They're a CSA farm catering to the Beausejour, Pinawa, and St. Vital area. While they may not call themselves an eco-village, they do practice many of the things you may expect to find in one. They're into responsible land stewardship, are free of synthetic pesticides, herbicides, and fertilizers. They have birds, hay, goats, cattle, rabbits, and bees. They have a house heated with a wood-burning cook stove, and they've experimented with animal traction using 2 oxen, Oscar and Ben, who are turning out to be high-maintenance hamburger, according to what Jacob wrote here. We have with us the author from this farm, Marcus Rempel. He's a market gardener, a pastor, and a soon-to-be-published author of a book called Life at the End of Us versus Them.
Did I say that I worked well with my wife? I think Jacob put that in. Greetings. I thought I would just give a bit of background, just so you have a bit of sense of the roots I'm coming here with, and then maybe maybe tell a story about a dream that I've had die a slow death over the last 10 years of living in community, and how I've come to be at peace with that, and then a particular idea that's from a thinker that's been really helpful to me in processing that. My personal roots are actually quite, I'm sort of in like home territory here. I grew up as a Mennonite Central Committee kid. My parents worked for this organization both here in Winnipeg and overseas in Europe. So I grew up very much in that like Mennonite parachurch organization world. I'm 43 years old now. I remember the 2 Gulf Wars, and remember marching at marches where we held up signs that said "No blood for oil," and then going home and processing like my own lifestyle requiring a fair bit of that oil and thus the blood, and what to do with that. And at a certain point, my passion for activism took a shift. I read some books by Wendell Berry along the way, and just focusing on some healthier integration of the basics of my life in terms of what I fed myself with and where that was coming from, and extracting that from a violent economy. became an important theme. So Ploughshares Community Farm, we take our name from there's an image that comes up in the Old Testament a couple of times of swords being beaten into plowshares, and neither shall they learn war anymore. And so that kind of exit from a war economy to a peaceable economy is a significant part of the vision there. And so Ploughshares came out of, there's a church community in Winnipeg called Grain of Wheat. Many of you will know another thing that came out of Grain of Wheat, which is Tallgrass Prairie Bread Company. And so it's a church that has a long history of taking an interest in food issues and just livelihood. And it created space for, they called them these seed groups, where people were given space to get together and talk about things that were important to them. And one of those things was an exploration group for rural life. And at a certain point, there was a kind of end of one season where the people that had been in that group together, some of them said, "Oh, that was a really interesting conversation for us to have every Wednesday, and thanks everyone." And then there were others that said at the end of that year, like, "We're ready to start having a conversation about buying land, and how would we," and just all the, those nitty-gritty implications that come with that. And so we read Diana Leaf Christensen, her book on community. It's featured in the magazine. That was one of the first things we did together. And we had meetings together for 3-4 years. And then 11 years ago, we bought land together on the Broken Head River, just 6 miles out of Beausejour, with no buildings on it except for an outhouse that had served the strawberry U-pick that was there once upon a time. And the kind of legal structure that we used to make that move was we formed a corporation, basically because it was the simplest structure. And maybe just as an aside, we're right now looking at letting go of that structure and maybe doing something else, because what we're finding is that the way we share costs, or at least there's 2 ways we share costs. This sort of the daily costs of maintaining the place we share through a rent structure. And then when we have like sort of big projects to do, then we'll lump money together in shareholders' loans. But the thing with the rent structure we're running into is that if you're a corporation and you have rental income, that's taxed at 50%. And so that was all fine when we had expenses during the year that we could use to cancel out that income. But now that we're not in that active building stage where we have great big building bills every year, that tax bill is really biting us in the butt. And so I was very interesting to hear about the marketing co-op, and I understand that it's a farm co-op that it is a farm co-op, yeah, that Northern Sun uses. I'm sort of been commissioned from my community to like collect legal, like if people are willing to share their legal documents. I'd be very interested in anyone, to give them my email address after this, and we're sort of collecting things to look at to think about revamping. I'm not sure why I chose this, but I think maybe because there's a kind of idealism and romance that's absolutely necessary to get us out the door on this journey, but it doesn't keep us. It doesn't really root us unless it gets mixed with other kinds of wisdom that are often about things that aren't as sexy, like suffering and conflict and just broken relationships even. So I thought I would share something that I've had to let go of that's been somewhat painful, from a place, and maybe it's a story I feel like is worth sharing because I feel like I'm sharing it from a place where it's like it's actually okay and even good, and there's been some really beautiful things that have grown up in the empty space that just never got filled in the way I thought it was supposed to be. So as I said, there was this church group that was kind of a birthing center for our particular group, and so there's all these like connections and associations to the world of church and Christianity that Ploughshares inherits. But once we got out together, I resonated very much with Justin's comment about, you'd think that this group is, that's attracted to this kind of thing is going to be so like-minded that disagreements about life philosophy and beliefs, etc., would not trouble us. But I was someone in the community that was I really wanted us to have like a shared spiritual life and some shared language spiritually, like a covenant or something that we would like all say amen to, and some practices, some ways of gathering that mark that's spirit life is part of being a human being, and that doing that together would be part of what we would do in community, because I'm someone who is passionate about creating those kinds of spaces, and it's sort of like I wanted, I like throwing those kind of parties, and I wanted everyone in my village to come to my party, right? And so there's been we did this sort of house church thing for a while, and that sort of fizzled out, and there were sort of a number of different ways that it just never happened. While I was sort of making sense of this, I came across the teachings of someone named Ivan Illich. Who here has heard of Ivan Illich? Yeah. So people in the eco village scene, you might know him as someone who he wrote this pamphlet called Energy and Equity, where he talked about life at the pace of a bicycle. You might know him as a kind of seminal voice in the homeschooling movement. He wrote a book called Deschooling Society. He did a lot of radical critique of development and sort of the whole progress myth. He coined a phrase. His description for the kind of development paradigm that was really picking up, especially in the 70s, when good, well-meaning college kids were joining the Peace Corps and going to Guatemala and Africa and sort of helping bring people into the bright, new, better future that was already, obviously in America, that just had to be kind of disseminated out into the rest of the world. He termed that whole campaign the war on subsistence. So there might be points of connection with this movement that way. But the thing that's become really interesting for me is really his philosophy of friendship. And for Illich, a jumping off point for many of his thoughts is really this story about the Good Samaritan, which is a story that Jesus tells when he's asked, "Who is my neighbor?" by someone who's trying to sort of pin down Jesus' social vision. And if some of you may have gone to Sunday school, some of you will have not. The basic outline of it is this Jew who is really, he's like one of the us people in this cultural context, is walking on a long journey and is beset by robbers and is beaten and robbed and left on the side of the road. And two really obvious good guys come along, religious leaders, that are too busy or just can't defile themselves with this messy situation, and they leave him in the ditch. And then this Samaritan comes along, and he helps the guy out. And Jesus says, that's what a neighbor is. Now, the thing that most of us miss today is that, like by now the word Samaritan is synonymous almost with just being a good helper. But in the context that Jesus is telling the story, it's really like the heretic. Like they're like part of this other group that is sort of half Jewish, and they have some of the same scriptures, but not all, and they have they worship in a similar way, but they're really the people that the Jesus's people have the biggest religious arguments with. So it's like your neighbor, and it's really that person who saves the person who's the one you most identify with in the story. So the answer is really like the one that you think, the one that most threatens your worldview could very much be, and it's not even the guy's been asking the question like, who do I have obligations towards? Who do I have to save? And basically the story is the person who most threatens your worldview might very well be the person who saves your ass. And so what Illich sees is that there's a break in that story from an understanding of, in order to be friends, what we have to do first is like decide what the rules are, what our shared beliefs are, and then we'll follow those, and then we can be friends. To this other surprise of the possibility of, situations of suffering, of pain, of mess, throw us together with people that we thought were, the heretic, and that can be the place where friendship blooms and where I get taken care of by someone that, I was really threatening to my personal identity. And so just sort of like living with that teaching and kind of relaxing into that, like maybe we don't have to figure out what we all, what the doctrine is of this particular group, has just really let me discover in my community, like the people that I most sort of had the tug of war with about, like let's get together and pray with in a certain way on a regular basis. Like to just receive them as friends and discover what the life is that makes sense for us to share space together, and just instead of deciding what the rules are ahead of the game, to just like start playing together and sort of figure out what works in this place with these people. And two really great things have come out of that. One is that I think, a person who would have been prone as a kind of real true believer to get into just an impossible argument and power struggle that would have riven our community to pieces, that didn't happen. And I discovered that I could be friends with people that saw some things differently. But the other thing that's happened is that I think if I had that sort of outlet that I was wishing for inside the community, I don't think I ever would have written a book. Right? And I don't think I ever would have made friends that were interested in pursuing spiritual practice together out in my neighborhood in this little tiny community that I'm now pastoring. Like those, which are both like two really beautiful things that have happened in my life in the last couple of years, that where the most painful empty space became the most fertile. And so I think I just want to share that as a kind of a story of encouragement for those of you that are heading out and on a journey with other fellow true believers in the movement, like where you're bound to have like some of that, and you have to do some of that. Like you can't just throw any random mix of people together and put them on some piece of land and they'll all figure it out. Like there does need to be some sense of shared commitments. But I feel like my life is like the shape of a tree in the forest that just, it fills the space wherever the openings are. And it's not really up to me to hack out this opening, where the light is coming at you. That's the space you grow into, and trying to manage and make sure that the other trees are behaving themselves and making that's not how a forest operates. So that's a story and a word from someone who lives at Ploughshares Community Farm. Do people have questions, or do we just move it on? Or? I'm happy to sit down. Yep, okay, good.
Well, thank you, Marcus. That was great. So we're going to introduce two people together right now. We're going to introduce Gerhard Dekker and Candice Humeny. And this is the longest living eco-village in Manitoba. You may have read about Gerhard. There's an interview with him in the Eco Journal as well as the current issue of the co-creator. And he's the co-founder of Northern Sun Farm. He's been on the land since 1979, watching it incorporate in 1984. He's had a lot of experience under his belt in construction, infrastructure, and community dynamics. And Candice has lived in Northern Sun for 6 years. This past winter, she spent her first winter in the city, is back out at the farm now. And we mentioned permaculture before. We now have an opportunity to learn about how it can be applied to an eco-village. She has extensive interest in permaculture, and there's a slideshow to share some permaculture at Northern Sun, and I'm going to let them talk because they're much more interesting than I am.
So shall I get into the history a little bit?
Maybe if you just want to start with
Yes.
introducing yourself. And
Yes, my name is Gerhard Dekker, as has been said. I arrived in Canada from the Netherlands way back in 1976, and I was sort of drifting around North America like a dog before you sit down and get first to circle around, find the right place. At the time, I didn't even realize that I was looking for a place. I felt driven to just keep moving. Until I met this fellow in Winnipeg who said that he was part owner of this piece of land that we're on now. And he took me out there on a nice fall day, and I looked at it, and it just struck me, this is it, this is the place I've been looking for. And so then the next year, I moved there with him and his girlfriend, and we just started doing stuff, like we built an outhouse and put in a well, and there was an old train car already on the land that we added onto to make it a little bigger. And more people came, until it got fairly big, but there was no structure. It was a hippie commune, basically. So that worked all right for a while, as long as there wasn't too many people. But once we got up to like 30 people, it got a little bit crazy. And then the issue that Justin has addressed, like the ownership of the land, can I really, how autonomous are we here, really? It came to a head, and the people that had invested in this piece of land, like way earlier, in the early 70s, they wanted out and they wanted to see some money. So then we established a co-op, Northern Sun Farm Co-op, and we raised all the money that we needed to purchase the property by selling shares. And so then we had a whole pile of shareholders that were all entitled to come out for weekends, which they did. But people started losing interest, like they mostly were supporting us, but they didn't really want to live a life. So we established a share buyback program where every year we would spend a certain amount of money, buy back shares that we had sold. And the great thing about the cooperatives structures is that you are not required to buy back shares if you're not in a financial position to do so. And there's no interest charged. So we basically had an interest-free loan that we could pay back at our leisure. And it took us 15 years, but we did pay it back. And then as soon as the cooperative had been formed, I applied for a spot, and other people did too. And I built myself a house. And then I had children. I met a woman there, and I had a couple of children, and things have just been progressing from there. And like, at one point, it looked like we were all getting old, and then a whole bunch of new people showed up. So that's really excellent, so things are going good there. And I would encourage whoever wants to come for a visit, because we entertain visitors all the time, and it's good for us to get visitors. You want to do something now, Candice? You want to talk about permaculture?
Well, I'll introduce myself too. So I don't know if I should readjust this. My name is Candice Humeny, and I've been living out at the Northern Sun Farm for the last 6 years. Prior to that, I was coming out off and on whenever I could for 4 years. And today I wanted to share with you guys a bit of my journey of how I got to be at Northern Sun Farm and why I was ultimately drawn to there. In kind of preparation for this, I was thinking back on something I had written in a journal, and this was back in July 2004, so quite a long time ago. And I wrote that I wanted to plant a garden with strawberries, raspberries, carrots, peas, beans, potatoes, spinach, lettuce, rhubarb, and an apple tree or 3. I wanted to learn to can and preserve fruits and vegetables and live without the amenities of the modern world for 2 years. And then I even included without TV, electricity, advertising, media, running water. I wanted to cook over a wood stove. And so that was something that had been lingering in the back of my mind since 2004. And so, I left home. I grew up on a farm, a monoculture farm in rural Saskatchewan, where the majority of people are doing the kind of pesticide farming. And I didn't really find that inspiring. I didn't want to, move back to Etonia, Saskatchewan and be a farmer by any means. And then I did a program called Kitimavik, which is a volunteer youth service program. And so I did that for 9 months, and that blew the doors open for living in community. That was my first experience living in shared accommodations with a large group of people. So it was basically 11 participants from all across Canada coming to live together for 9 months in 3 different places. And I just loved the idea of community dynamic, the ups and downs of all of it, and was really taken by that. But then there was still this other piece, this farming piece that was kind of lingering. And so actually Mitch, who I did Kitimavik with, he ended up getting connected with the folks at Northern Sun Farm. And he didn't have a vehicle, and he was stranded in Winnipeg, and I was living in Winnipeg, and he said to me, "Hey Candice, can you give me a ride back out to this farm?" And I was like, "Well, sure, I have a car, I can take you out there." And I was like, "Tell me a bit about this place, And he said, "Oh, well, they've got these little houses, and they've got some gardens, it's really beautiful, you should just come." And I was like, "Okay, all right, I'll come. Can I come for 2 days?" was what I requested. And at the time, Gerhard was hosting Mitch at that time, and so ended up staying at Gerhard's. Stayed out there for 2 days, and it was, as soon as I arrived, it was like I walked into that dream. It was like there were people with apple trees, and I was just totally floored that people were there and they were cooking over wood stoves and preserving food and doing all this. And so I felt like I had to be there. And so then I started, for the next 4 years, I would go out to the farm for, a week or 2 weeks or a couple months whenever I could, and then just initially decided, and then just made the jump. Since doing so, I've been able to plant my garden and do all that, and then along with that also comes the, similar to what you're talking about, that you have that community idea, that kind of that big vision dream, and then you start to see that it's not all gonna happen how you want it to. So that's kind of where I'm at right now, is just kind of reconstructing my greater vision for being out at the farm. So it's kind of an exciting place. I appreciate hearing your story. And I also want to say to the Myriad Eco Village people, I think what you guys are doing is really awesome. I was out to their land in the winter, and I think there's some really great potential there. I think you guys made a really wise choice. So yeah, so the other thing that we wanted to share, because we are a pretty well-established co-op, the co-op actually was basically incorporated the month after I was born, which I find really interesting. So I don't know, Gerhard, do you want to kind of go through the slides and maybe explain some of the pictures?
These?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can do that.
All right.
Yeah, first, something just came into my mind that I thought I should make a mention of. One of the first decisions we made, like after we decided that we were going to live there, was that we were never going to get connected to the hydro. There was no hydro on the land, and we had just been listening to these native people telling us how seriously they had been affected by hydro developments. And so we decided that we didn't want any part of that. Also, another part of it is, of course, that it would have cost a lot of money to bring it in. But we decided, even if because they were offering it for free to us at one point, hey, we'll give you hydro. And we said, no, thanks. And also, we had no money. Everybody was broke. And that turned out to be the perfect combination of no hydro, no money. Then you're forced to get creative. And we got creative, we developed all the different things that it takes to live there with no hydro and no money. Now the money thing has changed a little bit. Prosperity has hit us now, so now there's freezers and computers. But in the old days there wasn't, And so let's go through the slides here. This is our community center that we built. We started building it in 2007, so 10 years ago. And because we didn't have anything like that. We had a place that we called the main house, which was the old train car with the additions on it. And it sort of worked as a social gathering space, but it wasn't very well set up for that. And so when we sold that structure to one of our members for $3,000, we put that money in a bank account and we earmarked it for a community center. And guess what? 15 years later, we built a community center. And we did it all ourselves. It's our own design, our own labor. For the most part, it's recycled materials and our local materials. And that we started using it in 2009. It took a while to get it up and going, but it has turned out to be a fantastic investment. And I would highly recommend that for any community that wants to get going, is to establish right off the bat a social hub where you can get together in a neutral space. Because that's important, that it's neutral, that it's not like it's my house and you're my guest. This is our community, we're not guests, we live here. And so there.
Maybe I'll just touch a little bit on the.
Yeah.
So basically, Northern Sun, we have the setup that we have. There's the community center, and there's kind of the main main welcome spot, and then we're set up so that people have a site. So typically a site would be a family, and then on your site is where you have, they're pretty self-sufficient sites. People have their own gardens and then their own power source, whether that's solar or wind, and then also a wood cook stove in there. And so we kind of have our own little homesteader sites throughout, sprinkled throughout the forest there. And these are some of the buildings. There's a straw bale building, and yeah, several different, very small scale. They're all probably well under 700 square feet or so.
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah. And then that's some more houses, the inside of houses, gardens.
Yeah, stop here from go back. Way back in 1993, I was at an Earth Day event at the Forks. The Forks had just been recently opened, and there was a lady there. Lydia Giles was her name, and she had earthworms. I had never heard of red wrigglers before. And so I expressed an interest, and my friend Janine, who lives at our place, she came up with a little baggie of a quarter pound of worms and a bin for them to go in. And we still have those worms, and so Mike here, this is one of our members, he actually started a vermicompost business, where he brings in manure from surrounding farms, and worms live in it and turn it all into vermicompost, and then he bags his vermicompost and markets it. And
we use it as our humaner system too.
so what?
Our humaner system.
Yeah, like the worms also love to eat shit. So I don't know if they have all our members that set up?
Yeah.
Okay, everybody has a vermicomposting based human waste installation. They work beautifully. They're very cheap to set up. There's no smell, and you get to use the end product. And here's Mike working with his worms. He's raking off the top so he can harvest some worms there. This is in my greenhouse.
Oh yeah.
That one, yeah. That one's in Don's greenhouse. Yeah, so most of the houses have some setup for starting bedding plants in the spring, like a small greenhouse. Mitch and Don actually have a big greenhouse, but bigger. There's the go back one. There's the hoop house. It was found that things like peppers and eggplants do much better if you put them in a hoop house. So, and that hoop house gets moved every year. It's always in a different spot, and that's where the peppers and the eggplants come from.
Is that poison ivy and rocks there?
Yeah, that's poison ivy. Yeah, we have a prolific area of poison ivy. If poison ivy was worth money, you could be doing all right. That is Autumn and Orion. They're all grown up now. That's Sam. He's visiting this weekend.
They were all born at the farm?
Yeah.
Or all except for, I guess Sam wasn't.
Sam wasn't, but all the other ones were born at the farm. Yeah. So Sam is actually visiting now. He lives in the Yukon. He works as a truck mechanic, but he's taking training in Winnipeg. And this is a little building. At one point I decided to get goats. We had goats in the 80s, but it sort of was abandoned. But then I felt inspired to get a goat again because it seemed like such an interesting thing to do. So I built a little barn with a green roof on it. And there's the goat. And at first I had a doe with 2 kids. And I was milking the doe, but there was no demand for the milk. I was piling up milk and having it go bad, because without refrigeration, there's not a whole lot you can do. So then I gave the girl and the goat and the doe away and kept the little boy, and I castrated him. And there he is. There, so that's big. For 20 years, I used goats to pull firewood out of the bush in the winter. I built a sled, and then I would go take him in the bush, fill up the sled with green wood, and then he would pull it home. Amazing, like 300 pounds of wood, you know, and all you have to do is walk behind it. There is, this is my house quite a while ago. What's that? Rhubarb?
I think that would be some squash.
Maybe.
Yeah, I guess a few things I'll kind of point out in this picture. Gardening, I guess, first of all, but then also you see in the background of the one photo right here. So that is a solar food dehydrator, which is quite amazing for drying all kinds of fruits, vegetables, like kale chips, lots of different herbs. And again, because we are off-grid, so then we have all of this kind of solar technology that we incorporate into a lot of what we do. In keeping bees, which is something I've been involved in the last few years at the Sun Farm, we have like a solar wax melter. We also have an amazing solar oven that gets up to 450 degrees in the summer when you have it pointed, so you can cook a chicken and not have to start your wood stove. Yeah. Which I think there's pictures of that later on.
Yeah, mulching. We import phenomenal amounts of organic matter. Like, first there is like, for the cows, we bring in like 15 round bales, and the cows eat it all and make it into a big pile of shit. And then we put that on the garden, but then we also mulch heavily with straw. So every year about 4 or 5 big round bales of straw go into the garden, and it all just disappears and makes the soil black, you know. It's like, indeed, mulching is good. What is that? That's garlic?
Garlic.
There's garlic being harvested. There's our dugout. And here, when we started to build a root cellar, because of the water table being so high, rather than go into the ground, we decided to stay above ground, so then we needed to make a hill. And in order to make a hill to put the root cellar in, we needed a lot of dirt. We already had a dugout, but we hired the neighbor to establish for us a big pile of dirt by making the roots, making the pond bigger. So like, I don't know if you can see the pile, you know you can't, but so like the pond was made quite a bit bigger. It was all piled up in an area that was ready to get at. And then once we were ready for it with the structure of the root cellar, then in one day we moved all the dirt and made a hill. Yeah, this is, yeah, here. This is a shipping container that we bought. And put it on a concrete foundation. And it is going to be inside of the hill later on. But while the shipping container was sitting there, some of the guys at our place, they were working in St. Anne, building cottages for some contractor. And there they had these long, 30-foot long steel pipes that they were using to push them into the ground to build the cottages on top of for a foundation. And as soon as I heard of that, I thought, get us 4 of those, you know? And they didn't cost a lot. And what they are, those long poles, they're drill shafts from the oil patch. And when they wear too thin, then they discard them, and we pick them up for next to nothing. And then it occurred to me, like, I've been fantasizing about a water tower, you know, where you have pressurized water so you can easily irrigate gardens or run hoses and stuff. And I just thought, you know, like with the shipping container, we can attach the poles to it and then put a water tank on top, and then we'll put our hill, and then we have everything combined: the root cellar and a water tower. You know, so, and then that was the water tank.
Oh, there's the solar oven.
Yeah, this is a picture of one of the solar ovens. We have a bunch of them.
And the cold room.
There is one of the cold rooms. Like the cold room is basically it's a very well insulated room that is thermally connected to the house, which is being heated. But it is connected in such a way that you can adjust the amount of heat that goes in. So you can keep the temperature in the cold room fairly low, but without risking frost. And at first, I came up with these elaborate schemes with electronics and thermostats and motors and motor arrangements. And it worked okay until we were hit by lightning and all the electronics died. And then I discovered that you don't even need that. All you need to do is just open it a little bit and it's sort of self-regulating. So now pretty much all the houses have a cold room. Eh? Yeah, all of them do, yeah. And that's a really excellent way of storing food over the winter. Here you're looking at bees. Candice has been, at first it was Mike, and then it was Candice looking after the bees.
Now it's Mike again.
Now it's Mike again. So that is Janine's house. There, in 1983, we built a window. Some guys built a tower in our yard with a gas-powered welder, all out of recycled steel. And I built a window. And then in '83 we got it running. And it was great. Everybody had batteries, like the kerosene lanterns had already been discarded because they were just too dangerous and too stinky. And people had like little electric lights and a car battery or a deep cycle battery. And then you would drag it over to the main house where you could connect your battery to the window, fill it up and take it home again. And so that worked for a while, but then in '85, solar panels became relatively easy to get. And as soon as I had my first solar panel, that was it, no more hauling the batteries because like the batteries stayed full. Those are morels.
Wild harvesting.
Yeah. Oh,
Butchering.
for butchering a sheep there, yes. Yeah, because we've also been butchering our own meat. Eh? Because like if you don't sell it, you don't have to worry about any kind of regulation or inspection. You just do it, and you get to use everything. Like when you take it to a slaughterhouse, you lose everything. You lose the skin, you lose the bones, you lose the guts. It's all gone. You know, like all you get back with these little packages of meat. But if you do your own butchering, you can compost everything, you know, and use it. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So yeah, so that wraps up the slideshow that we have there. So I guess just a few things to kind of point out, with Gerhard being one of the more senior members of the farm, and then myself just having lived there for 6 years, how the farm has really changed. And I would say a lot of it has to do with technology that has come about, where you can now buy solar panels for, you know, relatively way cheaper than they were back in the 80s. So back in the 80s, they were working with very small 12-volt systems with like 80-watt solar panels, which 30-watt solar panels, which probably, I don't know if any of you are off-gridders or have any idea about solar. It's really fun. It's one of the things I've really enjoyed at Northern Sun is getting my mind around 12-volt technology and the really fun things you can build with that. Gerhard has come up with a lot of inventions from that. One of the things that we're just in the beginning stages of phasing out is taking 12-volt windshield wiper motors and having those pump water from our Sandpoint wells. And lots of little inventions like that Gerhard has come up with over the last number of years. But as technology has changed, there's been the pace at the farm, which I've noticed even just in the last 6 years, has actually really changed, where now people have a lot more solar. We can pump water like nobody's business, and we've got solar showers, and it's really interesting to see the ingenuity that is still coming from there, and us young people have a lot more to do out there. So yeah, feel free and welcome to come and visit us. We are on Facebook. There's a Friends of Northern Sun website.
The website is Northern Sun Farm.
Oh yeah, right. And we also have a website too. If you just type in Northern Sun Farm, you'll find us on there and ways to connect with us. We have been known to do school groups, as you can tell. and tours and woofing. So we're open to connect with people. I guess if people have questions, feel free. Or if you have anything more to say.
I feel inspired to switch media here. Would that be
Okay,
right?
okay. We do, how much time do we have? Because I also have like a, pardon?
Another 20 minutes.
Okay. I guess in maybe 10 minutes if you want to sort of say time's up, because we do have actually some really amazing aerial footage of the farm that was shot in the fall.
Yeah, but let's do that at the
So
end.
yeah, so we'll do that at the end. But.
Can I ask a question when I'm setting up your...
Yeah, for sure.
How's the money structure?
So we are set up as a farm cooperative. The buy-in is 1,000 shares, which costs, or is it 1,000 shares? I think that's how it works. 1,000 shares, and that's $1,000, and that's for just a membership. And then if you want to have a site, that's an additional $1,000. So basically, it's like a $2,000 buy-in, and then every year at our annual general meeting, we negotiate what the co-op fees will be. Currently, they're sitting at around $300. So that's where we're at with that, and that's basically just to cover the cost of the taxes and the maintenance on the road. And then everyone's finances are individual in terms of their own power systems, and then just whatever they choose to do on their site. Like that's all out of their own independent finances. Yeah. And there's there's a nurse out there and an organic farm inspector and a teacher, and there's spiral chimney sweeps. There's lots of people have their own businesses out there as well. There's a woodworker that has a pretty sweet wood shop if you need anything built.
Yeah. Also we found out like getting employment in the area is not hard. As long, like in this world, as long as you're willing to get your hands dirty, you got a job.
Yeah. And I know back in the day, a lot of people were living on just $3,000 a year. So that kind of gives a perspective, you know, in terms of kind of those permaculture principles, like living on the land, where it's keeping the overhead costs so low allows you to basically farm and garden out there more and be able to take time to do the wild crafting and just really be present out there.
So this is what the community center looks like when it's set up for a school tour. And this is what it looks like when the children are there. And here's another shot just to give an idea what the space is like. You can see there is a loft upstairs that people can sleep. And this is how we eat. This is just last year that we built this round table, because like we had this long string of tables, and it was very hierarchical, you know, with the bosses at the end. The round work was fine. This is the skylight, and there you can see somewhat how the roof was made. This is our sauna. I've been deliberately trying to come up with what I call community building infrastructure, you know, where you set things up to facilitate human interaction. And so like the pond is one of those, and the community center is one of those. The most effective one almost is the sauna. If you get everybody in the same room naked, then there's no hierarchy, you know, like it totally works. So this is what it looks like in the winter, and this is what it looks like in the summer. We built it in 2005, so it's 12 years old now.
And there's poison ivy around it.
There's poison ivy, yeah, but we mow and it's okay. There's our swimming pond. Great place, kids love it, you know. And it's got turtles in it, little fish. The water is clean and it's a great place. There's the same pond in the winter with Candice on it, because you can skate on it too. There's our large solar oven. It's the window in the center is 5 foot by 5 foot, so it's a substantial box. You know, like You can cook huge meals in it. If you wanted to, you could cook for 25 people, no problem.
Oh, even more than that.
Even more.
Yeah. You can get like probably 6 large roasters
Yeah.
in it. Like it's
And it only cost us $150 to come up with that because we structured it as a workshop with participating people that were paying participants. So like and they got meals for that too. So I forget what they paid, but it cost about $1,000 a bill. But it all came out of the contribution from the participants, and so like it ended up costing us $150. That brown tube that you see under the tripod there, that is the dinner bell. You hit that with a hammer, you can hear it a mile away.
You have to say please.
There's our solar food dehydrator. You saw that before, but this is their new location. And how that works is like that aluminum reflects the sun and concentrates it on the glass, so it produces warm air that then rises up through the food. It's very effective with production models. There's a solar shower. The tube's got a little bit bent from getting too warm, but it still works. It just looks funny now. And the shower, you can't see it from here, but at the back there's a shower, so you can stand behind it and have a warm shower. We also have graveyards. We put that in quite a while ago. I think when I was 50, I thought I might die soon. Because I promised myself that I was live until 50. So then I thought we should have a graveyard. And there was lots of enthusiasm for it, so we came up with a graveyard. And we've actually had a few funerals there. None of us have died, but our acquaintances have died and family members. So this is one of those occasions where funerals being conducted. Now I'm going to talk about water. In order to keep that tank on the water tower full, we needed to have a way of pumping water. And so we bought this fancy German pump that has an electronic controller on it that runs without batteries. It runs directly off solar panels. Because if you have a water tower, you don't need batteries, because the storage is in the water tower. Like when you need water, it will come from the tower if you can't run the pump. So this is a pump, and there's the tank being hauled onto the platform. And there, it's all there. The pictures look small. Here's another shot of it, and you can also see I got a little windmill. Because once the tower was there, I thought, hey, we could put a windmill up there. And I was like having a little trouble providing internet service through the winter because of power requirements. And so we got a little windmill up there, and it made all the difference. Now it's working fine. This is how I started my house. Like I've got this picture because I wanted to emphasize how you can build a house without having money. You know? So like what you see here cost me $1,500, and I could do it in one summer. And like I already knew that like it wasn't going to be big enough, but it was a start. You know? So then I kept adding on to it. Room on one side, room on the other side, greenhouse in the front, cold room in the back, and eventually it became this. So now you see the same hexagon structure in the center still, with all the additions on it. And that tower, there's an internet connection. And there's bins in the foreground there. Can you point to them, Candice? That's part of the vermicomposting human waste system. It goes into those bins, and the worms take care of it. This is that's the same picture again of the cold room. There's my little green roof again on the goat barn. This is a butchering picture. Here, one of our pigs is being butchered. And chickens too. Isn't that a lovely picture? And there's Candice and Alex in the forest. I was walking around with Candice, and we met Alex there, and he was just chopping firewood for our community center. Because our community center is also just totally runs on wood. We cook there every day, so we need a good pile of wood for that.
I want to say that.
You just stood. And here's another picture of it.
Someone has a question here, maybe.
Do you eat all your meals as a community?
In the summer, yeah.
In the summer
Only in the
we
summer.
just do, we actually, not all our meals, just supper. So we have kind of we call it like the supper club. And so everyone we kind of pay in to do a bulk food order at the beginning of the summer. And then there's usually about 10, 12,
Yeah.
8, it kind of varies year to year. But everyone takes basically 2 cooking days. And so it's like last year it was you'd cook for 2 days, but then you'd have the rest of the 3 weeks. It was just, you were just kind of free to come at 6 o'clock for dinner, which is pretty sweet. And we have, it's a standard that there be a protein, a carb, and a vegetable with each meal. So trying to keep it, and as much on the farm as possible. So there's people that, we all have pretty big gardens and tend to get as much food from there as possible.
Yeah, and I must say the meals are excellent. Like I eat better in the summer than I eat in the winter. So here's another shot of our gathering dirt to make the hill for the root cellar. And here, the shipping container has been placed, but in order for it not to crush under the weight of the dirt, we had to put shelves in it. So we filled it up with shelves so that they can help support the weight. And here we're building the retaining walls that are going to keep the hill away from the door. And we use earth bags, and so you see how that goes. These walls were built out of bags filled with sand and a little bit of concrete, a little bit of cement. So it's not fully concrete, it's much softer than that, but it holds its shape. And also you can see how we covered the top of the shipping container with the styrofoam insulation. And then we wrapped the whole thing in plastic, gives us another moisture barrier. So here's the restraining walls have been plastered. And here the hill has been put in, and now we're doing the finishing touches. And there's a finished project, and this is what it looks like now. And here, this was happening about a year ago, where the guys were dying to build something, and so they put a porch. They put a porch on our community center. And it turned out to be so excellent, because I thought, what, do we really need a porch? And I like, what's wrong with the community center? But there's no smoking allowed in the community center, but you can smoke in the porch. And there's more of a breeze there, and there's shade, and it doesn't rain. So it has turned out to be a very popular spot. And here is how it was constructed. It was done as what we call a build guild or a guild build. Yeah, you explain that.
Okay, so this is an idea that one of the co-op members came up with called the Build Guild, and basically it's based on the idea of Ubuntu. I don't even know if I'm saying that right, but basically creating a economic structure that's free from money. And so what this group does is they do building projects together. And so all throughout the year, every month they've gone to a different person's house, whether it's they're helping someone dig out their basement and put drainage in there, or they've built like a dry barn for dehydrating flowers and all kinds of things that they've done. So that's kind of what the Build Guild is about. And they're going pretty strong with their projects, and it's very amazing what they've all created. So that they've done this, and they also deconstructed a house about a month ago. And yeah, they're going strong.
Yeah, so the timbers that you see there are poplars that were harvested on our own land. And the metal roof that's been put on there, the year before the guys took down a chicken barn. They came up with a huge pile of plywood and a huge pile of metal roofing. We still have a pile sitting around, like it's being used, but it's going to take forever to finish it. And this is the last picture that I have here. So you want to go back to your permaculture picture? Oh, I got one more picture.
Or I can just...
I got one more picture I'll show you. It's not really all that relevant, but I thought I'd put it in just for the hell of it.
By looking to nature herself for design influence, we can create communities that stay balanced with their environments. I once asked Gerhard if Northern Sun Farm would be open to mentorship. He was receptive. The bigger question, of course, is what does this mentorship look like? A few of the things that go through my mind are permaculture design courses and eco-village design education.
I love you.
You too. A permaculture design course is where people spend 2 weeks in a permaculture intensive that takes place outside, learning more about what permaculture is and does. Eco-village design education is a course where skills are learned and developed to create cultural change for sustainability on personal and practical levels, both in application and theory. Canadian people that instruct these can be found in eco-villages like our eco-village on Vancouver Island, as well as La Cité Écologique in Quebec. There are others in the global community that I hope to bring here to Manitoba. These are some of the many hopes that I have for the website platform. However, these are future endeavors. Right now, my focus is on the co-creator. Other upcoming issues of the newsletter will include writing from people with Twin Oaks, as well as Findhorn, an eco-village in Scotland, with a global focus. Right now, all of my activity with a co-creator is a volunteer effort. I would invite you to consider donating to this cause. It would help out a little with the costs for printing the material, the flyers, website hosting, making it available to others in our communities. There are 2 ways you can donate. You can do it through PayPal on our website. If you go to ecovillages.ca/wecreate, there's a PayPal donation button. We also have a donation basket here. As I close, a few thank yous are in order. First off, thank you to my wife and son for letting me pursue this. Thank you to Sam's Place for making their venue possible and MCC for their projector. Thank you to Justin and Holly, Gerhard, Candice, and Marcus for coming out and talking about your projects. It is the sharing of your stories that helps us see and understand that there are alternatives that we may have not even thought were there. Thank you, Jim, for emceeing in 93.7 FM CJNU. Before we go, I want to mention another event that is coming up in June. On June 9th at the St. Norbert's Arts Center, I'm helping to organize a film panel. This panel, the film will be A New Story for Humanity, put together by the Findhorn Foundation. We will screen it and be talking about the stories that we live and the hope for a new story for us. I will conclude with a quote from the elders of Arabia of the Hopi Nation. You have been telling the people that this is the hour. You have been telling the people this is the 11th hour. Now you must go back and tell the people that this is the hour. And there are things to be considered. Where are you living? What are you doing? What is your relationship? Are you in right relation? Where is your water? Know your garden. It is time to speak your truth. Create your community. Be good to each other. And do not look outside yourself for the leader. Then he clasped his hands together, smiled, and said, "This could be a good time, for we are the ones that we are waiting for." Thank you everyone for coming.